Do you know the strange truth behind Loki's cunning trick that led to the sorrowful death of Balder, the most beloved god of Asgard? This tale begins with Balder, whose face shone like the morning sun, his eyes gentle and filled with wisdom. His beauty and kindness were known across all realms, but dark dreams began to cloud his nights, whispering of his demise. His mother, Frigg, with her flowing robes and motherly grace, feared for her son. She wept beneath the great trees of Asgard, her golden hair catching the light, and vowed to protect him. She journeyed far and wide, making every rock, metal, and beast swear never to harm him. The gods, clad in armor, their faces gleaming with joy, took delight in testing this newfound protection. They hurled stones and spears at Balder, laughing heartily as each weapon bounced off harmlessly. Yet, unknown to Frigg, in her haste she had overlooked the humble mistletoe, a plant she believed too small and harmless to warrant an oath. It stood innocently, its pale berries shining faintly under the distant sun, never once suspecting the role it would play in the tragedy to come. Loki, ever cunning and treacherous, found mischief where others saw innocence. He plucked the mistletoe, its pale berries gleaming like frosted pearls, cold to the touch. A wicked smile crept across his lips. As the gods gathered in celebration, their laughter echoing through the halls of Asgard, Loki's gaze fell upon Höður, Balder's blind brother. Höður stood apart, his broad shoulders slumped, his eyes clouded and empty, unable to join the joyous spectacle around him. Loki's voice, smooth and sweet like poisoned honey, whispered to Höður, "Why do you not honor Balder as the others do, Höður?" Höður sighed, his expression one of quiet sorrow. "I cannot see him, and I have no weapon to offer in sport." Loki's smile deepened, his words dripping with hidden malice. "Do as others have done, brother. Here, take this," Loki said, pressing the mistletoe into Höður's calloused hand. "Let me guide you. I shall direct your arm to where Balder stands." The room seemed to still as cunning. Loki gently grasped Höður's hand, the mistletoe light as air but carrying with it the weight of fate. The gods, radiant and adorned in shimmering garments, laughed and jested, unaware of the dark thread weaving through their gathering. The moment hung heavy, like a storm ready to break. With Loki's sly guidance, Höður, blind and unaware, loosed the fatal blow. The slender sprig of mistletoe, small and unassuming, flew through the air, its pale green leaves catching the light for just a moment before it struck. The delicate plant pierced Balder's heart, and the god of light, tall and radiant, gasped as life left him. His golden hair, once shimmering like the sun, seemed to dim as he collapsed to the ground. The laughter of the gods, which had filled the air moments before, fell into an eerie silence. As the realization sank in, the halls of Asgard seemed to tremble. Frigg, Balder's mother, her face pale as the moon, let out a heart-wrenching wail that echoed through the vast halls. Her long, silver hair fell around her shoulders as she dropped to her knees, clutching her chest as if her very soul had been torn apart. "Who has done this?" she cried, her voice thick with grief and desperation. Around her, the gods stood frozen, their faces twisted with shock and sorrow. Yet the answer, unspoken but known to all, hung in the air: Loki. The trickster, with his sharp features and cold gleaming eyes, had orchestrated the cruel act, his lips curling into a faint smile of satisfaction. Balder, the beloved of all, lay still, and the light of Asgard had been extinguished. The gods stood in silence, their faces pale and filled with anguish, frozen by the unimaginable grief that had fallen upon them. Odin, tall and stoic, his weathered face marked by age and wisdom, now appeared broken. His single eye, once sharp with knowledge, was clouded with sorrow. "No greater misfortune has ever befallen the gods," he whispered, his voice barely rising above the weight of his heartbreak. The sight of Balder's lifeless form, his once radiant beauty now dimmed, was too much to bear. His golden hair, once glowing like the sun, now lay dull against his cold skin, a reminder of the light that had been snuffed out too soon. Frigg, Balder's mother, knelt beside her fallen son, her hands trembling as she caressed his pale face. Her once regal figure, draped in silken robes, now seemed frail, weighed down by a grief no mother should ever know. Her voice, choked with desperation, broke the silence. "Is there none who will ride to hell and bring my son back?" she pleaded, her gaze shifting from one god to another. The echo of her words hung heavy in the air, mingling with the soft rustle of wind through the trees, as if nature itself mourned with her. The gods exchanged sorrowful glances, their eyes downcast, unable to meet her gaze. The twilight deepened, casting long shadows over the gathering, as if the very world mourned the loss of its brightest star. Odin, the Allfather, heavy with grief, sent his swift son Hermother to Hel, the realm of the dead, to plead for Baldur's return. For 9 long nights, Hermother rode through misty, desolate lands. His horse's hooves echoed through the shadowy realms, breaking the eerie silence of the underworld. At last, he reached the forbidding gates of Hel, where the air was thick with cold, and the sky was forever dim. There, in the dim glow, Hermother saw his brother Baldur. Baldur, once radiant, now sat still, his bright countenance dulled by the shadow of death. His eyes met Hermother's, a quiet sadness lingering within them. "The gods mourn your absence, brother," Hermother said, his voice soft yet strained with emotion, the weight of the gods' sorrow heavy in his heart. The queen of the dead, Hel herself, watched the scene with an unmoving gaze. She sat upon her throne, half her body alive, the other half cold and lifeless, reflecting the very nature of her domain. Her voice was as cold as the land she ruled. "If every creature, living and dead, weeps for Baldur, I shall release him," she declared, her tone indifferent, the words falling like stone in the still air. The silence that followed was palpable, hanging thick between them. Hermother's heart sank. He knew the gods' love for Baldur, but the thought of convincing every living being, every soul, to shed tears seemed a task too great even for him. The gods sent word through all the realms, calling upon every creature to weep for Baldur's return. Across the heavens and the earth, tears fell for the fallen god, except from one. In the shadowy halls of the underworld, a giantess named Thuk, shrouded in mystery and believed to be none other than Loki in disguise, stood unmoved. Her face was stern, cold as the stones beneath her feet. "Let Hel keep what she has," she sneered, her voice a harsh whisper that echoed in the gloom. The gods' hearts sank, for they knew this refusal had sealed Baldur's fate. Baldur, the radiant god of light, whose golden hair once gleamed like the sun, would remain in the cold grasp of the underworld. His once bright eyes, filled with life and joy, were now closed forever. The gods, powerless in their grief, could only watch as their hopes crumbled. "Is there no mercy?" Frigg wept, her voice broken with despair, but no answer came. Loki's treachery had condemned the fairest of gods, leaving a shadow over Asgard, a wound that would never heal. The gods, their fury blazing, pursued Loki across the realms. His once handsome features twisted with cunning, his sharp green eyes flashing in desperation as he fled. Loki, the master of disguise, shape-shifted into various creatures, a hawk, a fish, and a fly, hoping to escape the wrath of the gods. But they knew his trickery well and were relentless in their hunt. Finally, after a long chase, they seized him, binding him with the entrails of his own son. His wiry body, usually graceful in movement, was now forced into submission. In a cavern dark and cold, deep beneath the earth, they laid him on jagged rocks. His pale skin gleamed in the dim light, his raven-black hair falling in damp strands around his face. Above him, they placed a serpent, its eyes gleaming with malice. Slowly, its fangs dripped venom, each drop sizzling as it landed on Loki's bare chest. He cried out, his voice sharp with unbearable pain, echoing through the hollow chamber. "The pain will cease only at Ragnarok," the gods declared, their voices cold with finality. Beside him, his loyal wife, Sigyn, knelt, her delicate features etched with sorrow. She held a bowl above him, catching the venom as it dripped. But when the bowl grew full, she would be forced to empty it, and in that brief moment, the venom would strike Loki again. His body convulsed in agony, his cries filling the cavern once more. "Endure, Loki," Sigyn whispered, her voice trembling. "Until the end of days, I will be by your side." The death of Baldur stands as one of the most sorrowful tales in Norse mythology, etched in both grief and betrayal. Baldur, radiant and fair, with his golden locks gleaming like sunlight and his eyes warm as the summer sky, was the light of Asgard. Yet even such a beloved god could not escape the shadow of fate. When the mistletoe, a fragile, unassuming plant, pierced his heart, it was not merely Baldur who fell. Asgard itself trembled. Loki, the deceiver, watched in silence, his eyes cold and calculating. His slim figure cloaked in darkness, Loki's mischief had turned fatal. He had guided the blind Höðr's hand with malice, his whisper smooth, yet dripping with deceit. "Take this and honor your brother," Loki had said, handing him the deadly mistletoe. knowing full well what would unfold. When Balder fell, silence swept over the gods, their hearts heavy as the weight of loss settled. The once vibrant halls of Asgard dimmed. Odin, the Allfather, stood still, his one eye gazing upon the lifeless body of his son, his weathered face betraying no emotion, but within, sorrow deeper than any abyss. "Even we, who hold the power of the cosmos, cannot escape destiny," he murmured, the winds carrying his words across the realm. The gods learned that even the smallest force could shatter the mightiest of bonds, leaving wounds that time itself could not heal.